Wikipedia defines heaven as a religious place where beings such as gods, saints, or Bartolo Colons are said to live. I think after this video, fans will change its definition to an SRS video where you get to have Matt and Mike in one video.
Hi, I'm also here.
Speaking of Wikipedia, I can finally stop listening to every professor I've ever had and use it as my main outlet for research. What am I researching exactly? Well, I'm researching the ins and outs of the career of NFL wide receiver Antonio Brown. He's been on some major headlines recently, and today we're going to be discussing the career of the man who used to be called Bony Tony. So 2010, the year Armando Galarraga became diagnosably depressed, and when Old Spice commercials were America's favorite part about life, was the same year Antonio Brown signed his first NFL contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Brown was 5th on the depth chart for wide receivers back when Hines Ward was still around. Brown had an impressive rookie season, mostly just doing kick returns, and played in his first playoff game that year as well, making a key reception from Ben Cheeseburger in that same game. Little did Antonio know, his quarterback was going to soon become his worst enemy. 2011 rolls around. The Steelers are looking to deal with unfinished business after losing to Discount Double-Check in the Super Bowl the previous year, and Antonio Brown is looking to be a huge part of it. He became a starting wide receiver for the first time in his career as well. He continued to do his best to prove that he could be a successful starter, and did a pretty good job at doing so. Nothing too crazy going on for him this year, but for the Steelers, they secured a postseason berth only to have their season ended by a man who's currently a minor league outfielder for the Mets. Yikes.
Shortly before the 2012 season, Antonio Brown was signed to a shiny new 5-year contract, which to this day, Ryan Clark says was a mistake.
I said, when y'all give him his money, you're going to create a monster.
And you could argue Ryan Clark was dead on. In November of that year, he received a fine for running backwards on a punt return, which I would say this was awesome if I'm being honest. But as time progressed, Brown became the guy for the Steelers. As he rose up the depth chart, so did his peak performances. Not only was he breaking Steelers records, he was on his way to the top of NFL record books in such a short time. Breaking the faces of punters was also a thing he did too. By the end of 2014, he had quickly risen his stock from being just a skilled punt returner, to a talented receiver, to a dominant player ranked as the 8th best player in all the league by his peers just after that season ended. In 2014, he led the league with 129 catches for just short of 1,700 yards, and he also finished second with 13 touchdowns, but he wasn't done yet. The following year, he had a game with 284 yards receiving. And get this, no touchdowns. No one cared about that part though. Nick Foles had a touchdown catch in a Super Bowl, but Brown still ended up being in the God's Plan video a couple years later without a touchdown. Touchdown in that game, of course. He had touchdowns that year. Brown finished that season with one more major fine for doing this, one time getting flattened by Vontaze Burfict, and even more yards and catches than the year before, but actually didn't lead the league in yards. Julio Jones would do that. But at the end of this season, Brown would still be missing something bigger. A ring.
And it looked like he could have gotten it in 2016, when the Steelers coasted to an AFC North crown with Big Ben, a Pro Bowl offensive line, solid defenders like Ryan Shazier and Le'Veon Bell. Oh wait. Bell went down in the playoffs, and the Steelers lost to the Patriots as they usually tend to do. The most exciting Brown moments, however, came in the beginning of the season. A season which started with him being fined more than $15,000 for wearing baby blue cleats on the field, which is apparently the most offensive color in the world. He was also fined for twerking after scoring a touchdown, citing his reason for doing so as an indescribable life devotion to Nicki Minaj and her craft. Kidding about that last part. He also live-streamed a locker room celebration to Facebook Live, which was apparently against NFL policy. While they fined him for live streaming the content, I think they honestly should have fined him for the more egregious violation using Facebook Live. Starting 2017 with a bang, Brown signed a pretty new contract with the Steelers, unbeknownst to the fact that the end was near. He put on some more stellar performances, receiving more confirmation of him being one of the best players in the sport. He got hurt in Week 15, came back in the divisional round of the playoffs, and did all he could for his squad but fell short as the Steelers lost to Jacksonville. So 2018 was more about the Steelers' failure as a franchise more than Antonio Brown, but he had a big part to play in that as well. In a season plagued by controversy regarding players like Le'Veon Bell and Ben Roethlisberger, Brown thought it might be fun to get in on the action himself. He got into a fight with Big Ben, and he didn't show up to the final game of the season against the Bengals. With their season on the line in Week 17, their playoff hopes were vanquished.
You'd think Brown's pattern of odd behavior would have stopped by now, right? Think again. Because brace yourselves for what happened following the 2018 season. And rather than doing this chronologically, I'm just gonna list off some of what's been taking place recently. The simplest thing that happened was he requested a trade from the Steelers. But it was so abrupt and over the top that it was basically like if Pittsburgh was like, hey Antonio, you wanna be a Steeler? And he was all like, no! He appeared on that show, The Masked Singer, and was the first one out. He dyed his hair and mustache for some reason. That look reminds me of a hair and stash combo I would have drawn when I was 5. Or some me I would have made in 2007. He went on some Kanye West level Twitter surges, which I'm gonna kind of dive into right now, but there are way too many of them to put in one video. Apparently, he's going to join the Timberwolves. When asked what teams he wanted to play for instead of Pittsburgh, he gave the most confusing non-answer ever that we're going to have thrown up on screen by now because this is way too much to be reading ourselves. Alright, moving on. He did a Q&A on Twitter that was a part of, which sounds like a very noble cause, until he kind of didn't obey his own promises and took almost an hour to answer some pretty straightforward questions. He announced his preference to be known as Mr. Big Chest for some reason. He picked a fight with Emmanuel Sanders on Twitter, and Bruce Arians too for some reason. And he attempted to shout out Todd Gurley, but as you can see here, he doesn't know his name. Imagine like just watching any of his games and you could see the name on the back of the jersey. Or you've probably played against him too, maybe, or if you ever played fantasy football or read any NFL article that has his name, it's not that hard to spell. As you can see, this offseason has capped off a rather weird career for Antonio Brown. Weird but eventful. It's an absolutely ridiculous ride that probably isn't over. If we assume AB is going to see a new team for the 2019 season, we're potentially looking at even more chapters being written to this story. One could make the argument that his antics are getting in the way of this historic wide receiver's play on the field. His story by all means is not over. As of now though, what a ride it's been, and we wonder what organization he's gonna make headlines and strange tweets with next. Until then, we hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Subscribe, drop a like, share the video, do whatever you want to do to support us. We also have a support a creator code on Fortnite. Yes, we play Fortnite. The code is in the description. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you around. Thanks.
I call the shots, I run the balls, I'm Michael Jordan. Hit it with a little bit of push and a little bit of pull when a goddamn mic recording. I bring the heat, I rep the east, I like the south. I don't even know what to do with the gold that I get, bitch. I'm Michael Phelps. I'm like LeBron, I get the gold, I'm Sherry Khan, yo Khary bronze. I'm Randy Moss, I'm Mary Khan. My game on Royce, I'm Barry Bonds.